Hello, Jason. It's really good to see you. Um, the AVP facilitators will be really interested in what you have to say. So I'm going to ask you first to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Good morning to you too. My name is Jason Alderman, and I'm 46 years old, and I've spent about 27 years of my life behind bars. Last 19 of that straight. 14 of that in maximum security prisons. So before AVP, my life, there was a lot of violence in my life. I came from, the honor culture of the South, where, we grew up fighting bullies and everything on the playground and fighting each other. My dad was a criminal. My childhood was sort of filled with his big arrests. He was arrested by the feds for bank fraud in Florida, and selling hot cars off of a lot in Alabama, Eufaula, Alabama, and flying pot into the country in Georgia. We had an RV, and he would take me and his best friend's daughter to meet him, and his best friend would fly in the mountains and meet us in his airplane, the skunky airplane. My grandfather, before that, he went to prison. Before that, he was a violent man. And my mother was not physically violent, but she was verbally violent. Our house was one of a lot of yelling and just constant arguing and fighting and, strife. I think I had 4 stepfathers before I moved out. I know about, just fighting all the time and arguing and not being able to get along. I have go ahead, Kathy.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit, Jason, about your first experience with AVP and what kept you coming back.
Well, I was very skeptical that it could work in the very violent prison that I worked in, that I lived in, a program pushing nonviolent principles. I was in Alexander Correctional at the time, and there's YouTube documentaries about it being one of the most violent prisons in America. It's a very violent place. I had been in prison about 14 years at that time, all of that in maximum security, and I had seen just countless people stabbed and cut, their faces cut open to the bone, just the worst sort of horrific injuries you could imagine. And then come in with this program telling us they're going to teach us how to, have nonviolent conflict resolution skills. And it's kind of like, do you want to be the only guy that's living by Jesus' principle about turning the other cheek in a place like that? It didn't sound good to me. So I was very skeptical at first. And then when I went through basic AVP and advanced AVP, it was just such a magical and transformative experience that it really it changed my whole outlook on it. My whole outlook. It was amazing, and I was really blown away. I had to admit, I was blown away.
So, Jason, tell us then, what made you decide that you want? We asked for volunteers to become AVP facilitators, inside facilitators. Why did you go ahead and volunteer to become a facilitator?
Because I saw that it could work. I saw that, us, the first 25 guys that had been, sort of selected to go through it to begin with, the prison did a good job of choosing those first 25. We were all leaders from different areas of the prison. You had some gang leaders, you had some religious leaders, you had just people from all walks of life. And when we first went in, I'm looking around, and some of the guys I knew, some I didn't, but I knew that they were all, a lot of them were big bad guys. These were alphas, these were some serious guys. And over the course of that 3-day weekend, I saw their walls come down. I saw us engaging with each other. I saw us learning these skills. And, by the time we finished basic and advanced AVP, we had formed bonds that were real, and we had a shared experience, and we had a shared group of principles that we knew, and we knew we could live by. There was no way possible after finishing basic and advanced AVP that I felt like I would ever have to have a fight with another person in that room. We had just gone through too much together, and we learned too much together. So we had those shared principles, and we had that shared experience. And I knew how, my experience had been. So I felt like if these 25 men can go through the program and have that experience, then 25 more men can go through it and have the same experience, and 25 more and 25 more. And pretty soon after that, you got the whole 1,000-man prison, And I just saw how it could really transform the culture of our prison over time if we could get enough men to go through it. And so when you think about it like that, it sort of puts a weight of responsibility on you. One of the principles of AVP is, we're willing to suffer for what's right, to do what's right. And I wasn't sure that we could pull it off, but it seemed like we might be able to. So I felt like if I had had such a good experience with it and I knew that it might work, then I had a responsibility to try to spread it throughout the rest of the prison. So that was why I did it.
And I would just point out that it was not an easy decision, because you gave up a good bit of your relaxing time in order to do it, because I know you especially were well prepared when you came to sessions. So I know you spent a lot of time preparing. And then you gave up basically your whole weekend in order to do it. And you did it weekend after weekend after weekend. So it was a sacrifice. So tell me then, how did the AVP program change the way you felt about yourself?
About myself. Well, I guess it's given me just more confidence and not confidence in myself. I had confidence in myself before, but I guess confidence that I can make a difference in wherever I'm at. That same principle I mentioned a minute ago about being willing to suffer for what's right. That's the hardest part of prison culture. You're taught from the moment you come in to mind your own business, to stay out of everybody else's business. And, you learn that pretty quick. It's like, okay, all right, y'all got that. And you just stand back and watch when things go on. And that's a way of staying out of trouble and keeping yourself from getting into any sort of, violent confrontation. So when you turn that around and you say, okay, now I have a responsibility to try to head these sort of things off and keep them from going that way, and to try to help guys from getting into altercations like that. That's a big step. It's a huge step. And, that's not my personality. I'm not that guy normally. But once I had gone through the program, and especially after I became a facilitator and we started putting some more of the guys to the program, and you could see that culture beginning to form where we had, 50 or 100 guys who had been through the program, and, you'd see them in the hallway and you kind of say, hey, and maybe one of them gets into an argument and you go over, you see that it really can work, because they're looking at you not as another inmate. Now they're looking at you as somebody who's been through AVP as well. And they respond, and they'll let you de-escalate the situation. They'll let you, talk it out between them and the other guy. And it's just giving me a little more confidence that I can step into some situations, not every situation. So if you see a guy that's, got 20 guys beating on him over there, I'm not going to be the guy that runs in and tries to take the knives away from him, But there are a lot of situations in prison where you can do a lot of good and stop something really bad from happening and change the culture of your prison over time. So it's given me just more confidence that I can make a difference.
So how did the AVP program change your relationships? Maybe relationships within and outside of the facility?
Well, it definitely does. That was how they got me initially when Journeying John and I think yourself came and did the little intro for those of us that were thinking about signing up for it. He didn't really use a prison example. He used an example of he and his wife going on vacation, and he wanted to go fishing and she wanted to go see her in-laws. And it seemed like sort of an irreconcilable difference of what they wanted to do. And he showed how to use the principles of AVP to, to reach some sort of consensus where they would both be happy and neither would feel like, the other one was getting over on them, and there could be harmony in their marriage and everything like that. And that really, stuck with me. I remember that now years later, that little example. And I wanted it, not just because of, I didn't feel like I was a really violent person and I needed a lot of help in the prison. The only time I used violence, I felt like was when I had to protect myself. So I didn't really feel like I needed the program from that standpoint, but I wanted the program to teach me how to have better relationships. So that was really my initial draw for wanting to sign up myself. And it really proved that. I feel like AVP could be, done as a couples therapy or as a couples retreat or anything like that to teach you how to have better relationships. It's helped me have better relationships with my mother and with everyone around me, because I see now that, we all have our own perspectives. We're all just trying to live life and get what we want most of the time. And the times that we clash are when I want something that is different from what you want. And if you can use AVP's principles to de-escalate these conflicts, I might not be in a physical altercation with my mother, but I've had some knockdown, drag out verbal confrontations with her, and since AVP, I've those sort of situations don't really happen anymore. We might argue, but we argue in better ways. We found better ways to get along, and it really can affect all of your relationships. It's not just in prison. It can make all of your relationships better.
Okay, thank you, Jason. One more question about how the program may have changed you. Did the program impact or influence the way you set your own goals and aspirations? In other words, things that you want to do with your life?
Yeah, it definitely did. Even more so dramatically, perhaps, than how it's affected me personally or affected my relationships. AVP showed me in a very concrete way what I had already learned in a sociology class, which is that we create the social world around us every day. And AVP helps you recreate the social world of a prison as more and more of the guys in the prison go through it and the culture of the prison begins to change. So when I saw that in effect and I saw that actually happening, it was like a light bulb came off. And I said, we can change. If I can change and these guys can change and this prison can change, then any prison can change. So it really drove home to me something that I'd already been wrestling with, which was that our system is broken. Our criminal justice system is broken. Our prison system is horribly, horribly broken. And it's just getting more and more broken. It seems like every year. And I knew from the time that I went through AVP that it didn't have to be like that. I saw how our prison had begun to change. I saw how the guys who had gone through AVP had changed. So if we could change, then any prison could change. It just needed effective programs. It needed programs that were really going to help. It needed guys who had gone through these programs and were willing to engage with them and get involved and do good things. And a lot of times in prison, there just aren't programs like that available. The guys are just sitting around, for 10 or 20 years trying to do the time the best they can. And they turn to drugs, they turn to gangs, they turn to hustling, they turn to all these negative activities that lead to violence. And to me, that's not what prison should be about. We've got busloads and busloads of our children. These are America's sons and daughters going to these places, and they're a little messed up. Sure, maybe they have addiction problems or gang activity or hustling problems or whatever, but they're still salvageable. They're still fixable. And we send them to these very violent prisons where they spend 10 or 20 years just trying to survive, and they learn all this culture of violence, and then we unleash them on society again, and they go out and they do something worse than they did the first time, and we blame them. And it's not their fault. It's the system's fault. And, there's that old cliche, don't blame the system, but we should blame the system. The system is broken. And AVP showed me that the system can be fixed. If you get the right programs in the right place, the system can be fixed. And it's changed me to want to devote my life to prison reform. Um, I'm preparing to enter college when I get out, and in January. So I've got a few months I'm going to spend with my family, and then I want to go off to college, and I'm going to study criminal justice, criminology, and try to make a difference, because I really see how um, we can't fix this. It's not irreparably broken. It can be fixed.
All right, thank you for that, Jason. Let's turn now to some advice to new facilitators. We have several new facilitators that work in our community, and you would love them. They are young folks. They are, as a matter of fact, several of them are still in college, and of course they're experiencing those first few workshops when they're in charge. And so, what advice would you offer? Because you went through the whole program and then you became an inside facilitator, and I might add, an excellent one. So, what advice would you offer to new facilitators?
Just a couple things. Trust the program first and foremost, and look for opportunities to achieve buy-in with the guys who are going through it. The program is great. It's been around for decades. It's now gone international. It's been refined and refined over the years, I assume, to the point where if you just trust the program, it's going to work, and you don't have to come in and do this huge amount of work. You want to prepare, like you said beforehand. You want to take some time and really make sure you know the material, and especially know the parts that you're presenting. But it's really not that hard. It's if you go into it and you take it seriously and you want to do a good job, you're going to. And as long as you trust the program, it will work for you. So I would just say, lean on that and trust it, and don't be anxious. Don't worry about trying to make things happen. The program will work if you work. And when I said that about looking for opportunities to achieve buy-in, the biggest thing that you got to have is you got to have all the guys in the group buy into the program and engage with it. And that's the part that seems like it's the hardest, but it's also the magic of AVP, because it seems like every time you put on AVP, at some point over the weekend, something happens and it causes the group to begin to change and begin to open up, and the walls start coming down and the guys start engaging. And man, it's amazing. It's magical. And, if you look for those 2 or 3 little opportunities that present themselves over the course of the weekend, where there's something happens, there's a moment and something happens, you'll know it, and you'll be able to sort of seize it, and maybe guide the group in a little way that helps everyone to open up and engage more. And once you achieve that buy-in where everybody buys into the program, that's when the real magic happens. And AVP can do a lot of good.
So, are there any pitfalls, any things that you learned about yourself as a facilitator that you would want to kind of forewarn new facilitators about? Anything that you found yourself doing that you thought to yourself, well, this is not really working. Let me go back and try something different.
I think just when you go through AVP, it is such a magical experience, and it's so transformative that when you go through both levels and you go through facilitator training and you're getting ready to present your first workshops, you feel this real weight of responsibility come over your shoulders, and it's heavy. You know how good it was for you, so you want to make it that good for the group of guys or girls that you're presenting it for, and then that's great. You want to do a good job. But like I said a minute ago, it's not all on you. So don't feel like you have to go in there and make it happen. Don't feel like you have to go in there and force it to happen. If you trust the program, it will work. So I think the biggest thing for me is just don't try to do too much. You can, those moments that I was talking about that happen where the guys open up and they engage, it seems like they happen sort of organically. They just occur. I remember one in particular, one that we did, I think together, Compassionate Kathy, if you weren't in the other room, where a guy talked about how he'd been beaten as a child, and it was one of the guys who was going through the program. It was not a facilitator saying this, but he, for whatever reason, decided to open up to the group and tell us that. And it just became a moment where, 10 or 15 of the guys around the room were shaking their head and nodding because they've gone through the same experience, and it helped them to open up and buy into the program. And from then on, it was a really open group, and they were all engaged, and they bought into the program. And you really can't manufacture those moments. You can't contrive them. You can't just make that happen. So you've got to sort of sit back and trust the program and trust that it's going to work, and just look for those moments when they do occur, and sort of just help the guys to open up and let their walls come down so that they can buy into the program. That would be my only advice, and the only pitfall that I really see, because like I said, the program is so refined and it's so good that it really works itself out. You just trust the program and trust your other facilitators.
And I might add, trust the participants, because there's a lot that goes on that we don't control, because the participants bring, especially the ones that, like you say, there's some immediate buy-in. Those folks are the ones that really guide the workshop.
Right.
Okay, one last thing. Is there anything else that you want to share that, remember, I'll be showing this recording to the facilitators, but we'll talk about it after we stop the recording. I'm wondering about sending this to Miss Jenkins.
Well, that would be fine with me. Let's see. I guess if I was going to say anything else, it's just, there's that thing that people say, you have to be the change that you want to see. And when I said that a minute ago about how AVP had taught me that you can make a difference wherever you're at, I think, a lot of the change that we need to see in our system is on we inmates to make that change, and that's true both in the prison where that we may be housed at the time and when we get out. And I feel like, the way that our system is decaying, it was never perfect to begin with, and now it's completely understaffed everywhere. Our system is decaying to the point that they can't even staff the prisons enough to keep, the places even as safe as they once were. I was transferred to Georgia prisons. I met Compassionate Kathy in North Carolina prisons, and I had a sentence in Georgia that I had to go and finish once I was finished in North Carolina. And so when I got down to Georgia, their system's even more decayed here than it is up in North Carolina. They're way more understaffed. They spend probably half on each inmate as they do in North Carolina. So there's basically no staff whatsoever in Georgia prisons. The gangs run the prisons. They're, every single day it's just somebody being stabbed, somebody being cut, somebody being beat down by 20 people. And, it's just a very violent place. So if there's no staff to handle these issues and to make these places better, who's going to do it? It has to come from the inmates, because there's simply no staff to do it. And that's not an ideal situation. And hopefully we can get some changes in our public policy pretty soon, where we can have more staff and we can have better programs in prisons and we can have better prisons. But for right now, this is what we got. And the only way that we can have better prisons at all is if some of the inmates or all the inmates go through programs like AVP and decide we're going to make these places better. I got to a point in my own transformation where I stopped waiting for the state to fix me. I stopped waiting for them to fix me. And I said, okay, I've got to take responsibility for my own self. I've got to try to change myself. And I didn't know how to do that. So I had to read books and learn and try to come up with ways to fix myself. It's sort of like a doctor, trying to learn how to be a doctor to fix a wound that you have while you're suffering with a wound. And, but that's a good thing in the sense that once you do that, you realize that if I can change, then everybody else can change. And it goes back to that principle about, being willing to suffer for what's wrong, for what's right, and to try to help other people change. So, as I prepare to get out and go to college and to try to make a difference in the system, I'm trying to be the change that I want to see in the system. I feel like we returning citizens, as we're called, have a responsibility. We know the system better than anybody else. We've been in it. We lived in it for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. If we know the system's broken and we know that millions of other American sons and daughters are going to have to go through the system that's broken and that it needs to be fixed, then it's our responsibility to try to fix it. And I feel like we're uniquely qualified for that job because we know it so well. And those of us that have made changes in our lives, we also know what it takes to make a change. So I would just say, that's my thing. I feel like those of us who have gone through AVP and other great programs like Kairos and other ones, we really have to band together and try to make a difference in the world and try to make the world a better place. And that includes our prison system.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for taking time to do this and for your honesty. It's been a terrific experience to listen to you. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I hope we can chat for a few minutes after I stop.
Okay. Thank you too, Kathy.
Sure. Okay, let's see.